He handed me divorce papers at our anniversary dinner. Not at home, not in his office, but at Le Bernardin in front of Manhattan's elite, cameras flashing from the society photographers he'd invited. "Consider this my final gift to you," he said, sliding the manila envelope across the white tablecloth like a business transaction. His new woman emerged from the ladies' room, right on cue. Blonde, polished, everything I apparently wasn't. The room fell silent except for the click of camera shutters capturing my humiliation in real time. I didn't scream, I didn't throw wine. I just smiled and said, "Thank you for showing me exactly who you are." Because I knew something he didn't. I was carrying the one thing that would change everything. The heir to his empire was growing inside me, and karma was about to write the perfect ending. If you've ever been underestimated because of who you are, this story is for you. Hit that subscribe button because sometimes the last laugh belongs to the woman they tried to silence. I grew up in Detroit where the streetlights didn't always work, and the heat got shut off when Mom couldn't make payments. She cleaned office buildings downtown, taking 3 buses each way, coming home with stories about the powerful people whose trash she emptied. "Baby girl," she'd say, folding laundry on our kitchen table. "Those fancy folks put their pants on one leg at a time just like us. Don't ever let them make you feel small." I was 8 when I decided I'd never be invisible like that. While other kids played outside, I buried myself in library books, dreaming of boardrooms instead of cleaning them. My 3rd grade teacher, Mrs. Rodriguez, pulled me aside one day. "Zara, you have something special. Don't let anyone dim that light." She didn't know she was planting seeds that would grow into steel. The guidance counselor shook her head when I said I wanted to study business at Columbia. "Maybe consider community college first, sweetheart. These Ivy League schools, they're not really for girls like you." She meant black girls from the projects, but she wrapped her prejudice in a smile. That night, I studied until dawn. Every page turned in defiance. I earned a full scholarship and graduated summa cum laude. I never sent her my diploma, but I kept her doubt as fuel. Wall Street was a battlefield disguised as marble floors and glass towers. I was one of 3 black women in a sea of suits that looked exactly alike. They called me diverse Heir behind closed doors, as if my achievements were charity instead of earned. But I had something they didn't. Hunger that came from having nothing to lose and everything to prove. At 28, I launched my own investment firm. They laughed at first. A black woman trying to play in their sandbox? But money talks louder than prejudice, and when my fund outperformed theirs 3 years running, the laughter stopped. That's when Marcus noticed me, not because of my skin or my story, but because I was beating him at his own game. The Forbes Summit was where our worlds collided. I was the keynote speaker, talking about disrupting old money with new vision. He sat in the front row, Marcus Sterling, heir to a shipping empire worth $8 billion. After my speech, he approached with that smile that had graced magazine covers. "You're not what I expected," he said. I should have asked what he meant. Instead, I was flattered by the attention of a man who could buy small countries. Our first date was at a hole-in-the-wall Caribbean restaurant in Queens. He insisted, saying he wanted to see the real me. I thought it was sweet then. Now I realize he was testing whether I'd be embarrassed by my roots. When I ordered oxtail and plantains without hesitation, when I laughed loudly at the comedian on the small stage, when I danced to the steel drum music, he looked at me like I was exotic wildlife in my natural habitat. The proposal came at the Met Gala. He got down on one knee right there on the red carpet, cameras capturing every angle. The ring was a 15-carat diamond that caught every flash. "Marry me, Zara," he said loud enough for the microphones to catch. "Make me the luckiest man alive." I said yes because I thought love looked like fairy tales. I didn't realize I was agreeing to be his beautiful accessory. The engagement party at the Sterling estate felt like stepping into a museum where I was the only artifact that didn't belong. His mother, Victoria, air-kissed both my cheeks while her eyes stayed cold. "How refreshing," she murmured to her sister loud enough for me to hear. Marcus always did enjoy his charity projects. I pretended I didn't catch the barb, but it lodged in my chest like broken glass. I tried to fit their mold, softened my laugh, straightened my hair, traded my bold colors for beige and cream, started playing tennis at the country club where I was often mistaken for staff. The wives there spoke to me in slow, careful words, as if I might not understand their refined vocabulary. I smiled and nodded, dying inside while they planned galas I'd fund but never truly belonged to. The wedding was everything Marcus wanted. 500 guests, cathedral ceilings, a dress that cost more than most people's cars. I looked perfect in the photos, the beautiful black wife that proved his progressive values. But walking down that aisle, I felt like I was disappearing into someone else's vision of who I should be. My mother cried tears of joy, believing her daughter had made it to the promised land. If only she knew the land came with invisible chains. Marriage revealed the truth behind the fairy tale. Marcus loved the idea of me more than the reality. He loved telling his friends about his brilliant wife, but cut me off when I shared my opinions at dinner parties. He loved my success story, but grew uncomfortable when I wanted to expand my business. "Why work so hard when you don't need to?" he'd say, as if my ambition was a character flaw instead of what drew him to me in the first place. I discovered the affair through his unlocked phone. A text from someone named Isabella. "Can't wait to see you tonight. The penthouse key is where you left it." No dramatic confrontation, no thrown objects. I simply took a screenshot and went to bed. Some betrayals cut so deep that anger comes later. First comes the numb realization that you've been playing alone in a game meant for two. The next morning over coffee, I placed his phone on the table. "Explain this," I said quietly. He didn't deny it, didn't apologize, just sighed like I was inconveniencing him. "Zara, you've changed. You're not the woman I married." I laughed, but it sounded hollow. "No, Marcus, I stopped pretending to be someone else. That's what's different." He had the audacity to look confused, as if my authenticity was the real betrayal. The divorce announcement was strategic theater. Our anniversary dinner, the most expensive restaurant in the city, society photographers alerted in advance. He wanted to control the narrative, paint me as the difficult wife who couldn't appreciate his generosity. "I'm setting you free," he said as flashbulbs captured my shock. Isabella emerged from the bathroom in a red dress that cost more than most people's rent. The crowd murmured their approval. Marcus Sterling was upgrading to a more suitable model. I left that restaurant with my head high and my heart shattered, but I carried a secret that would soon rewrite everything. 3 weeks earlier, I'd taken a pregnancy test that showed 2 pink lines. I hadn't told Marcus yet, waiting for the right moment that never came. Now, sitting in my lawyer's office signing papers, I realized the right moment was never coming. Some conversations happen on their own timeline. The pregnancy was confirmed at 8 weeks. Dr. Martinez smiled as she pointed to the ultrasound screen. "Strong heartbeat," she said. "Due date is March 15th. I stared at that tiny flutter on the monitor, my hand instinctively covering my still flat stomach. This child would grow up knowing their worth wasn't tied to anyone else's approval. That was my first promise as a mother. I didn't announce the pregnancy immediately. Instead, I focused on rebuilding my life outside Marcus's shadow. My investment firm had suffered during the marriage as I'd prioritized being the perfect wife over growing my business. Now I threw myself back into work, taking meetings, closing deals, proving that my success was never dependent on my last name. The prenatal appointments became sacred time, just me and my growing baby, away from cameras and whispers. I'd talk to my belly during the drive home, sharing plans for our future. "We're going to be fine," I'd say, one hand on the steering wheel, the other on my expanding middle. "Better than fine. We're going to be extraordinary." At 5 months, I couldn't hide it anymore. The society pages had already been speculating about my weight gain and changing figure. I decided to control my own narrative for once. Instead of hiding, I walked into the Sterling Industries board meeting I was still entitled to attend as a major shareholder. The room fell silent as I took my seat, my pregnancy unmistakable in the fitted dress I'd chosen deliberately. Marcus dropped his pen. His face went white, then red, cycling through emotions like a broken stoplight. Victoria Sterling, sitting at the head of the table, looked like she'd seen a ghost. The family lawyer, Mr. Henderson, started shuffling papers frantically. They all knew what I knew. The Sterling fortune was protected by a trust that only passed to legitimate heirs born within the bounds of marriage. That marriage might be ending, but this baby was conceived during its duration. "Gentlemen," I said smoothly, settling into my chair. "Ladies, shall we discuss the quarterly projections?" But nobody was thinking about quarterly anything. They were calculating how a woman they'd tried to erase had just become the mother of their empire's future. The emergency family meeting happened that evening. I wasn't invited, but I heard about it from Marcus's own mother. Victoria called me herself, her voice tight with barely controlled panic. "We need to discuss this situation like adults," she said. The situation. That's what my child had become in their eyes. Not a grandchild, not a blessing, but a problem to be managed. We met at her Park Avenue penthouse, the same apartment where she'd once told me I'd never truly belong in their family. Now she served tea and bone china while discussing custody arrangements for a baby I hadn't even decided to share with them. "Of course, we want what's best for the child," she said, as if the child's best interest was synonymous with their family's financial interests. Marcus arrived late, looking like he hadn't slept. He sat across from me without meeting my eyes. "Is it mine?" he asked quietly. The question hung in the air like smoke. I could have lied, could have let him wonder. Instead, I met his gaze steadily. "Yes, conceived in February. You do the math." He ran his hands through his hair, the weight of consequences finally settling on his shoulders. The media caught wind of the pregnancy through a paparazzi photo of me leaving my OBGYN's office. By evening, it was trending on social media, "Sterling heir on the way." The headlines wrote themselves, painting me as the scheming ex-wife who'd trapped a billionaire with a strategic pregnancy. They didn't know I'd been ready to raise this child alone, that Marcus's panic was proof of his priorities, not mine. Isabella, his new girlfriend, wasn't handling the news well, according to mutual friends. She'd moved into the penthouse expecting to become the next Mrs. Sterling, only to discover that the previous Mrs. Sterling was carrying the key to the kingdom. Some sources said she'd already started looking for her own exit strategy. Love built on money crumbles when someone else holds the deed. My mother flew in from Detroit the day the news broke. She found me in my apartment, surrounded by law books and prenatal vitamins, researching trust law and fetal development simultaneously. "Baby girl," she said, pulling me into her arms. "You're going to be just fine, better than fine. You're going to show them what strength looks like." She'd raised me to be a warrior. Now I was preparing to raise one of my own. The Sterling Family Trust was ironclad, written by lawyers who'd anticipated every scenario except this one. Marcus could divorce me, marry Isabella, have 10 more children with her, but none of that mattered. The trust specified that only the firstborn legitimate child of Marcus Sterling would inherit controlling interest in the family empire. My baby, conceived during our marriage, was that child. Isabella's hypothetical future children would be wealthy, but they wouldn't hold the power. Marcus's attempts at reconciliation started in the 6th month. Flowers arrived daily, jewelry appeared on my doorstep, handwritten letters expressing regret and promising change. I read them all, then filed them away without responding. Some bridges once burned can't be rebuilt with gestures. They require genuine transformation, and Marcus was offering performance, not change. The baby shower my friends threw was everything the Sterling family parties weren't. Loud music, real laughter, genuine love. My college roommates came, my first employees, women who'd known me before I became Mrs. Sterling. We ate soul food and played silly games, celebrating new life without calculating its net worth. This was the community I wanted my child to inherit. People who valued character over cash flow. At 36 weeks, Marcus called about a car accident. Not serious, but serious enough to land him in the hospital overnight. As his emergency contact, a detail we'd forgotten to update, I was called to make medical decisions. I could have ignored it, let his family handle everything. Instead, I found myself sitting beside his hospital bed at 2 in the morning, watching him sleep. He woke to find me there, confused but not surprised. "Zara," he whispered, "you came." I adjusted my position in the uncomfortable chair, my belly making everything awkward. "Don't read too much into it," I said. "I came because it was the right thing to do, not because I forgive you." We sat in silence after that. Two people who'd loved each other once, now strangers with shared DNA growing between them. Labor started on a Tuesday night, 3 weeks before my due date. I called my mother, my best friend, and my doula. I did not call Marcus. This was my moment, my strength, my victory. For 10 hours, I breathed and pushed and claimed my power back with every contraction. When my daughter finally arrived, yes, daughter, not the son everyone assumed, I held her against my chest and whispered, "Welcome to the world, Amara Sterling. You're going to change everything." The birth announcement I released was simple. Amara Sterling was born healthy and beautiful on March 2nd. Mother and daughter are doing well. No father mentioned, no reconciliation hinted at. Just facts and gratitude. Marcus found out through social media like everyone else, a deliberate choice that sent its own message. He'd chosen public humiliation as his divorce method. I chose public strength as my response. The legal ramifications hit the Sterling family like a tsunami. Amara, as Marcus's legitimate firstborn, was now the primary beneficiary of a trust worth billions. The family's high-powered attorneys scrambled to find loopholes, but the documents were clear. My daughter would inherit controlling interest in Sterling Industries when she turned 25, with me as trustee until then. Victoria Sterling requested a meeting when Amara was 6 weeks old. She arrived at my apartment with gifts, a diamond bracelet sized for a baby's wrist, a trust fund document creating a college fund, an invitation to bring Amara to family gatherings. All gestures that said, "We accept the child, but not necessarily the mother." I accepted the trust fund and college money. I declined everything else. Marcus's visit started when Amara was 2 months old. Court-supervised at first, then gradually more independent as he proved he could be trusted with his own daughter. Watching him hold her for the first time broke something in me. Not romantically, but emotionally. This should have been a moment of shared joy, not supervised obligation. His choices had stolen that from all of us. Isabella was gone by month 3. Some relationships can't survive the reality of competing with a child for inheritance rights. Marcus didn't seem heartbroken, just tired. He'd lost a wife, a girlfriend, and gained a daughter he'd have to earn the right to know. Karma had perfect timing and a sense of poetic justice. The custody arrangement we eventually worked out was fair but firm. Marcus could see Amara regularly, but she would live with me. He could contribute to her upbringing, but I made the major decisions. He could claim her as his heir, but she would know her worth came from within, not from wealth she'd inherit someday. Most importantly, he would respect me as her mother, not as his ex-wife who'd inconveniently complicated his life. My investment firm flourished beyond anything I'd imagined during my marriage. Freed from the expectations of being the perfect billionaire's wife, I took risks, made bold moves, and attracted clients who respected my vision. I hired brilliant women, especially women of color, creating the opportunities I'd wished for during my early career. Success was sweeter when it lifted others with me. When Amara turned 1, Marcus showed up to her party with a gift bigger than our living room, a custom playground set that belonged in a mansion, not my modest apartment. "She needs space to play," he said, looking around my place like he was seeing it for the first time. "Maybe it's time to consider moving somewhere more suitable." I handed him back the receipt. "She needs love, attention, and values. Square footage is optional." The media attention eventually died down, replaced by newer scandals and fresher headlines. I was grateful for the anonymity. Amara could grow up without cameras tracking her every milestone, without society pages commenting on her wardrobe choices or playdate companions. She would have wealth when she was older, but first she would have normalcy. By Amara's 2nd birthday, the dynamics had shifted completely. Marcus had remarried, a woman chosen by his family this time, age-appropriate and board-approved. I sent a congratulations card because grace costs nothing and shows everything. They could have their fairy tale wedding. I had something more valuable, a daughter who would grow up knowing she was chosen, wanted, and loved unconditionally. The trust documents required updates when Amara turned 3. Sitting in that law office, signing papers that secured my daughter's future, I thought about the woman I'd been when this all started. She had sought approval, acceptance, and love from people who saw her as temporary decoration. That woman was gone, replaced by someone who knew her value and refused to negotiate it. Marcus and I found our rhythm as co-parents, navigating school events and birthday parties with civility that sometimes bordered on friendship. He was learning to be a father slowly, respectfully, earning his place in her life through consistency rather than demanding it through DNA. Some lessons come late but still count when they finally arrive. Victoria Sterling continued sending gifts for every holiday, attempts at relationship building that I neither encouraged nor discouraged. Amara would decide for herself what kind of connection she wanted with her father's family. My job was to raise her strong enough to make those choices from a position of self-worth, not need. The investment world had taken notice of my post-divorce success. Business magazines featured my story, not as the scorned ex-wife, but as the brilliant financier who'd built an empire while raising a future CEO. Speaking engagements flooded in, and I found myself on stages again, but this time telling my own story on my own terms. When people asked if I regretted anything, the marriage, the divorce, the public humiliation, I told them the truth. I regretted trying to shrink myself to fit someone else's vision. I regretted believing that love meant sacrifice instead of celebration. But I didn't regret the journey that led to Amara, even the painful parts. Sometimes our greatest gifts come wrapped in our deepest struggles. At night, when I tucked Amara into bed, she asked for the story. Not Cinderella or Snow White, but the real one. About the mommy who was brave enough to stand up when people tried to make her small. About the little girl who was born to change the world. Not because of the money she'd have, but because of the courage in her blood. "Tell me the part where you didn't cry," she'd say. "Tell me the part where you smiled." So I told her about the woman who walked out of that restaurant with her head high. About the mother who chose to raise her daughter with love instead of bitterness. About the warrior who learned that the best revenge isn't getting even, it's getting better. And someday, when she's older, I'll tell her the most important part, that her story is hers to write, and she should never let anyone else hold the pen. On Amara's 4th birthday, something beautiful happened. The party was in our backyard, filled with her preschool friends and their families. Marcus arrived early to help set up, and for a moment, watching him hang streamers while Amara directed the operation, I saw what co-parenting could look like when egos stepped aside. His new wife, Catherine, came too. She was kind to Amara, respectful to me, and seemed genuinely happy with her life. No competition, no tension, just adults doing right by a child. Isabella seemed like a fever dream from another lifetime. Some people are meant to be lessons, not permanent fixtures. The Sterling Industries board meeting, where Amara's trust was officially established, became a milestone I'll never forget. At 4 years old, she was too young to understand that she'd just become one of the youngest billionaire heiresses in history. She was more interested in the spinning chairs and the fancy water bottles than the legal documents securing her future. My mother, now a regular visitor from Detroit, watched her granddaughter with eyes full of pride and disbelief. From cleaning their offices to owning their companies, she whispered to me as Amara charmed the room full of lawyers. "Baby girl, you really did it." But we both knew the real victory wasn't the money. It was raising a child who would never question her own worth. The foundation I started in Amara's name became my new passion project. Seeds of Strength provided scholarships and mentorship for young women of color entering business and finance. Every girl who walked through our doors carried the same fire I'd once had, the same dreams that had sustained me through doubt and discrimination. Speaking at the Foundation's annual gala, I looked out at the audience, some of the same faces who'd witnessed my humiliation years earlier. But now they were writing checks, applauding my vision, and treating me as the power player I'd always been inside. The woman who'd been discarded as a charity case was now the one determining where the charity went. Marcus's presence at these events was supportive but background. He understood now that my success was never about him, never dependent on his name or his approval. It was mine, earned through sleepless nights and impossible odds, polished by rejection and perfected by resilience. When Amara started kindergarten, I realized how much had changed. She walked into that classroom with confidence I'd had to learn, with security I'd had to fight for. She introduced herself as Amara Sterling, and my mommy runs a big company. No shame, no hesitation, just facts delivered with 5-year-old certainty. The other mothers knew who I was, but they treated me like any other parent worried about lunch money and homework schedules. It was the normalcy I'd craved during my marriage, the acceptance I'd tried to buy with submission. Now it came naturally because I'd learned to accept myself first. The penthouse apartment I eventually moved to wasn't bought to prove anything to anyone. It was practical. Good schools nearby, safe neighborhood, space for Amara to grow. But I'd be lying if I said it didn't feel good to write that check, to own something beautiful without needing permission or approval. Years passed, and the story that once defined me became just one chapter in a much larger book. Amara grew into a curious, confident child who spoke 3 languages, played violin, and could explain compound interest to anyone who'd listen. She was being raised to inherit power responsibly, to understand that privilege comes with purpose. The day she turned 10, Amara asked me about the divorce papers. She'd found newspaper clippings in a memory box, photos of that horrible dinner that changed everything. "Were you sad, Mommy?" she asked. I thought for a moment before answering. "I was hurt," I said. "But hurt became fuel, and fuel became strength, and strength became you." Marcus had evolved too, from the entitled billionaire who'd discarded his wife for a newer model into a father who showed up consistently, who listened more than he spoke, who'd learned that real power comes from lifting others up, not putting them down. His relationship with Amara was genuine now, built on presence rather than presence. The trust fund matured beautifully over the years, growing not just in value, but in purpose. Amara would inherit not just money, but a legacy of overcoming, of rising above circumstances, of transforming pain into purpose. She would have choices I'd never had, but she would also have the values I'd fought to maintain. On quiet Sunday mornings, when it was just Amara and me making pancakes in our sunny kitchen, I sometimes marveled at the journey. From a girl in Detroit whose heat got shut off to a woman raising the future CEO of a shipping empire. But the real transformation wasn't financial, it was spiritual. I'd learned to value my own voice above the applause of others. The business empire I'd built alongside raising Amara became a testament to what was possible when women refused to choose between ambition and motherhood. My investment firm now managed portfolios worth hundreds of millions, and every success story we created echoed with the message, you don't have to shrink yourself to fit someone else's vision of your life. Standing in my office one afternoon, looking out at the Manhattan skyline, I thought about that woman who'd sat in a restaurant 3 years ago, divorce papers scattered across a white tablecloth. She couldn't have imagined this view, this life, this strength. But she had something even I sometimes forgot. She had hope. And hope, it turns out, is the most powerful investment of all. If this story reminded you of your own strength, comment, "I rise." Because every woman who's been underestimated, discarded, or written off has the power to write her own ending. Don't forget to like this video if it moved you, subscribe for more stories of women who refuse to stay down, and ring that notification bell because your story matters too. The world needs to hear from women who turn their pain into power, their setbacks into comebacks, and their struggles into strength. Share this with every woman who needs to remember that being discarded by the wrong person is actually being freed to find the right life. Remember, they tried to bury us, but they forgot we were seeds.